Okay. We have a bit of a small club meeting today, but enough people come, so I think that's fine.
I know there's 3 more people working with this meeting too.
Yeah, okay. That's true. So, I have this word here, and it's called semantics. And I think maybe like some people have heard this word before. What exactly does this word mean? Does anyone?
He knows.
What does semantic mean? Semantic mean? Have you heard of that? Well, I think we'll wait on a couple more people, so. Liu Jiawen is here. Okay. We're gonna do a little bit of, we have a couple short presentations, so I think it's just chill today.
What does that mean? What is semantics?
What does it?
I don't know.
Do you have a guess? Also, like,
Was it like a tech company?
a tech company.
Yeah,
It sounds like a good name for a tech company, doesn't it?
It was. I swear.
Really?
Semantic or something like that. I don't know.
Semantic?
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's not this.
Oh, it's a play on word, I see.
I couldn't find them.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if he'll be here, but,
Chris.
yeah.
How we doing today?
I feel like everyone's feeling a little groggy today, so. What? More energy? Oh, konnichiwa. Okay. Okay, we got second person. Well, I think we're here just left. Yeah.
Yeah, this new guy should go into. No.
Yeah. Okay. So let's. Can you do sign in? I don't think this is here. So. Yeah, we'll begin the presentation now. So semantics is a more larger branch. It's a larger branch of linguistics. So if you remember our previous page, we had. I actually don't have the image here. So there's phonetics at the bottom, which is just individual sounds, and then phonology, which is how sounds interact with each other, and then morphology, how words can change, and it changes the meaning and grammatical, inflection. And then we also have syntax, which is in a sentence, you're getting to a lot of words, right? How do those words rearrange each other to make a sentence, and how that affects meaning. So now semantics deals with a more broad, category of linguistics, and it deals with meaning. Okay, so you guys might have heard this phrase. Okay, like for example, in a discussion, you're like, "Oh, now we're just debating semantics, right?" Have you heard that?
Never.
Maybe you guys need to have more discussions, but like maybe like in a heated debate, like if people are overly, they want to pinpoint definition, or they're just arguing definitions, we say, oh, now you're just debating semantics, right? So that's like a lot of times people say that. So what exactly is semantics? In linguistics, it's defined as the study of the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. Yeah, go ahead.
The dictionary puts it as the study of the logic of words and the meaning behind them, how they interact with each other in a fluid space of human communication.
Right, so I guess there's like 2 types of semantics in this case, like you mentioned, right? First is the meaning of words, which is lexical semantics, which is the meanings of individual words and how they're formed, I guess. And then the second type is a compositional semantics, which, as you said, deals with the logic of sentences and how that changes meaning. So I feel like compositional semantics would have more ties into syntax, while lexical semantics is more on a category by itself. I have no idea how this audio will turn out, actually. Hopefully. I'm a little bit confused today. Okay. Moving on. So let's define this idea of meaning. I want to sneeze right now. Hold on a second.
That's it.
Okay. So what exactly is the meaning of a word? So in semantics, it's defined in two aspects. Sorry, I'm not in my regular state of mind today, but the first idea is sense. What is sense? So when we're thinking about words or speaking the language, like if I ask you, like, what is a cat? Think in your heads, what's a cat? Cat. Right? You will have a mental image of what a cat is. Right? So for example, if I told you like a cat is an animal, it has fur, it has 2 ears, oftentimes it's depicted as triangles, right? It has whiskers, it's often lying around, right? Or something like that, domesticated cats, right? So you have this mental idea of what a cat is. So that's your mental representation of what it means, right? Now, this mental representation doesn't have to be concrete, it can be abstract. Like, for example, a word like love or a word like kindness. Can you picture what love and kindness looks like in your head? Like a concrete object.
Wow.
It's really hard, right? Maybe like you can associate it with things like colors or an action, right? You can think of it, hearts, maybe like that, yeah. But oftentimes, like a word's sense can be very abstract, but you still have, nevertheless, you have a mental representation of it. Like, I don't know, what does mental mean? Maybe you think of a brain or something. And then the other thing is a reference, and this reference is like, when you're talking about a word, it refers to, like, what it actually refers to when you're talking about a word, right? So, one example is, like, if I say cat, I think we talked about this before in the start of linguistics, at original meeting, if you guys want to take a look at the first meeting. Honestly, obviously the audio quality is kind of bad. But we talked about this idea of a referent, which is like what a word refers to, right? So for example, there are a couple reference types, right? So for example, there are common nouns. So if I say teacher, I could be referring to Mr. Wallace here, right? Or in some other context, I could also be referring to other teachers, like Miss Palazzo, right? A lot of people here have taken Miss Palazzo's class. Or Miss Montgomery. So there's like those are, I think, some of the teachers that often come to mind. But as an example, actually no, those are like, yeah. So teachers can refer to different things, and then we can get more specific. So then there's proper nouns, proper names, right? So when I say Gavin, everyone knows I'm referring to Gavin here, right? Or Elise, I'm referring to Elise here. Or Zach, right? So I'm referring to specific person, right? Or it could be like a country's name, right? Like United States or Japan, right? So, yeah. And then there's adjectives, which refer to what you're describing. Like, so it has more to do with compositional semantics here, because it's tied in with syntax. But a lot of times adjectives describe a trait, a characteristic of something. I think these are pretty straightforward things. Any questions at this point? We're just going to take it really slowly today. Next week we're going to do something more fun. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. What do I have here? So let's have a thought experiment, right? Can an expression have a sense but no referent? Honestly, I was just writing these random sentences, but I haven't thought of them myself. So let's do a collective thought experiment. Any clarifications on what sense is or reference? Sense, general understanding, right? And sense is like your depiction, visual, like mental depiction. And yeah, like I think when we're in the context of speaking, you can have words, we have a general idea of what they mean, but we're not necessarily in a given context referring to something, right? So I could just be saying, like in the previous sentence, oh, I don't want to be debating semantics. I mean, or something like that. Like, can you guys think of other examples? This is a pretty hard question. Yeah, go ahead.
Whimsical. How do you? There's no like reference for whimsical, but
Right.
you can sort of like get a sense of what it means.
Sure, whimsical, right? I don't know, like, I think in some sense, like, if you're talking a specific context and you're like, oh, just this person is whimsical, then the referent might be that person or that trait of that person, right? But sometimes when we're saying things, they might not necessarily have a referent. Okay, secondly, the second question is, can there be different senses for the same referent?
What is referent again?
What a word refers to.
Oh, okay.
So sense usually like maybe talks about, like, I feel like what I'm understanding this is, my understanding is sense refers to what your personal idea of what a word means, and versus what a word actually means. Like, not actually because languages, semantics evolve, right? Languages, the meaning of words always evolves, but depending on I guess, like, generally what people like all refer to something as, like, I don't know, like, could be like something like code name or something. Code name? No. Okay, but can there be different senses for the same referent?
Yeah.
So, any examples of this, I guess? I feel like this is kind of hard to visualize.
Wait, so like as a sense of how I perceive the word?
Sure, I mean, like, if we take a look at the definition here, a sense refers to the mental representation of a word. And reference might refer to a specific thing or a set of things, right? So, for example, your sense is, I guess, traits or like what you're mentally visualizing the thing ought to be, right? If we use the previous example of cat,
Oh.
cats are fluffy, they have fur, they have whiskers, they
I can answer your
triangular
question.
ears, and then, but it can refer to this specific cat, or it can refer to a certain group of cats, right?
Okay, then like I think country names, I guess. I can visualize, let's say, the U.S. in a few ways. When I think of the U.S., I can see, like, I don't know, would emotion be like part of a sense? Like, when I think of the U.S. like as a word, I think of like patriotism or something like that. But like I can also like perceive it in like a more geographical sense.
I mean, sure, yeah, exactly. Like, there can be different meanings for the same word, right? Yeah, I think that makes sense. The other idea I had was, especially for things that have multiple meanings, like, I guess people interpret things differently, right? So, what was the example I was thinking of earlier? I don't know. But, yeah. So let's take a look at these words, right? So Brazil, right? Brazil is a proper name for a country. So it refers to everyone. Whenever I say Brazil, you think of the country, right? So there's one sense, one referent for the same word. Now, book could have one sense, right? We know it has pages, it has a cover, it has content, it has text, right? But when I say the word book in a conversation with you, right? Have you read this book? Have you read that book? I might be referring to multiple different types of books, right? I could be thinking of a fiction, like Harry Potter, or a non-fiction book, like, I don't know, Just Mercy, we read in 9th grade, right? So there's, then that Discovering French workbook. I don't know. I don't want to bore you guys out too much, but, and then blue, well, I would say, okay, it has the same reference, we're referring to a color, but the color could have different senses to it, right? Am I talking about a lighter shade of blue, the sky, like the sky-colored blue, or am I talking about blue as in the color of the ocean, right? So they can have different reference here. Yeah, and then also, like, usually, just to think about, do these words have refer to a particular entity, like Brazil, or do words refer to a set of entities, right? So book could refer to many, many entities in the world. Yeah. Okay, I'm kind of sleepy, but It's okay. Hopefully next club meeting will all be hyped up more. So let's talk a little bit about the relationships between words. So there's like a couple of relationships in linguistics that we have defined. I guess one for each category of linguistics. So you have phonological relations. So words that are similar sounding, right? Sounding wise, like night versus nice. Without context, you probably don't know this, right? I don't know, like for example, two words in Japanese, right? Just use you as an example. Ame and ame. So you have to get, like they're phonetically, they're the same, but they have different meanings, right? And then there are words that are morphologically related, right? Like run versus ran. So that tells you something about the tense, when something happened, right? And then there are things that are syntactically related. So words that have the same part of speech, right? So for example, I eat soup. Actually no, like, and I drink soup. They're like interchangeable. Actually, who says I eat soup? Anyone here says, okay, you say I eat soup. But my point is they're considered, when you're analyzing syntax, they're considered the same part of speech. So drink and eat would be two words that are like syntactically related. Now when we're getting to semantic relations, what does that mean? I'm going at such a slow pace, lunch is almost over.
Okay.
So words are related based on their reference, right? So if two words, so they could be like a synonym, right? That could be a type of semantic relation. So let's talk about these relationships. I have to speed up a little bit. So there are three types of semantic relationships. Technically there are four types. The first is hyponymy, which deals with subsets and supersets of a reference. I'll get to that later. And then there's synonymy and antonymy, which is pretty straightforward because everyone knows what a synonym and antonym means. But let's take a look at these. So first is hyponymy, which is a word that is like, so you can say, for example, a word X is a hyponymy of word Y if X is like a subset of Y. So an example is Chihuahua is a hyponym of dog, but dog is a hypernym of poodle. So you see how, like, for example, an example of this is, another example of this is, for example, like a lawyer is a top type of employee. So lawyer would be a hyponym of employee, but employee would be a hypernym of lawyer. This is kind of like APCSA, right? Inheritance. You know? Can anyone think of any other examples? Go ahead.
Student is like a hypernym of Daniel.
Sure. Student is I guess, yeah, that's true. Like, I'm in the subset of students, right? And Daniel would be a hypernym of students. Yeah, any other ideas? Okay, how much time do we have left?
6 minutes.
6. Okay, we need to speed up. But yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Superman is a hypernym of super.
Yeah, Superman is a hyponym of superheroes, and superheroes is the superhero is a hypernym of Superman. Okay, synonymy is pretty straightforward. A word is a synonym of another word if they're same or similar in meaning. Obviously, very little words are truly like 100% synonymous. So it's really hard to have two different words but have the exact same meaning. So yeah, unless you're like considering like multiple languages, but like in the same language is really rare. So like even like for example, I would say happy and jolly are synonyms, right? But they still have that small distinctive little like semantic difference in there. Yeah, we're gonna skip these because we don't have time. But I went too slow earlier. So antonymy is basically deals with antonyms. Obviously, everyone knows this through grammar class, I guess. But I think the interesting thing is words can be antonyms in different ways. So, for example, they can be opposite, quote unquote. Like it's defined. A word is an antonym if it's opposite in at least some sort of way. But they can be opposite in a couple of ways, right? So, for example, Like complementary pairs are pairs that we think of are like they're not exactly opposite of each other. Like there's not like an opposite or like a reverse of being married, but there is a opposite in the sense that you can either be married or single, right? So that's an example of a complementary pair. Another example is scalable pairs. So those are like antonyms that can be put on a spectrum, right? So for example, an example of this is hot and cold. So if you can think of like any spectrum, and you have two things that go on opposite sides, they can be gradable or scalable pairs, right? So scalable antonyms, like conservative versus liberal, right? That's another example. Right, go ahead. Do you want to say it? Nothing? Here's an example. Do you have anyone else have an idea, like other examples of gradable antonyms?
Old and new.
Old and new. So something can be, I guess you can think of it as a scale as well, right? So things can be relatively new. So I think you can think of gradable pairs as relative, right? Usually something's relative, big and small, or high and low, or tall and short, right? So those are like gradable pairs. And then we also have reverses, which is like usually they can be actions or they can be nouns, like ascend versus descend. And then you have converses, which are like also like the same idea but in different directions, right? It's like come and go, or we would consider them converses, because they're all referred to the action of moving, right? But they're from different perspectives, right? So lend and borrow is another example. Okay, how many more minutes? Time check.
Like 5.
Okay, so let's talk about some types of reference. What kinds of reference can an example have? So, okay, honestly, just to briefly summarize, I went too slow today. So you have basically, I'll share everyone the slides afterwards. But next week we'll have a Japanese presentation. Next week. So you better show up. I know, I see you here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay, thanks for letting me use the recording, so.
Like I said,
How do you pause this? How do you?
the square.